In ancient Israel, the Israelites found themselves locked in a tense standoff with their enemies, the Philistines. The two armies were camped on opposite hills, separated by a vast valley. Every day for 40 days, the Philistines sent forth their champion, a giant named Goliath, to challenge the Israelites. Goliath was an imposing figure, standing over 9 feet tall and clad in bronze armor so heavy that few men could even lift it. He carried an enormous spear with an iron tip that weighed as much as a small weapon itself, and his presence alone struck fear into the hearts of those who saw him. Each morning and evening, Goliath would march into the valley and shout his challenge, his voice booming across the hills. "Choose one man to fight me," he would roar. "If he kills me, we Philistines will serve you. But if I defeat him, you will become our slaves." His taunts were laced with mockery, not just for the Israelites, but for their God. The soldiers of Israel cowered in fear, unwilling to face a foe so massive and seemingly invincible. During this time, a young shepherd named David was living quietly in the hills of Bethlehem. He spent his days tending sheep, playing his harp, and meditating on his faith in God. One day, his father sent him to the battlefield to deliver food to his older brothers, who were soldiers in the Israelite army. When David arrived, he was struck by the atmosphere of fear and despair that hung over the camp. He heard Goliath's taunts and saw how the soldiers avoided even looking toward the valley. Curious and appalled, David began asking questions. "Why is no one fighting this Philistine?" he asked. "How can he be allowed to insult the armies of the living God?" His brothers scolded him, telling him he was too young to understand the seriousness of the situation, but David was undeterred. His words reached King Saul, who summoned him. When David stood before the king, he made a bold declaration. "I will fight this Philistine." Saul looked at David, a mere boy with no military experience, and shook his head. "You are only a youth, and he has been a warrior from his youth," the king said. But David insisted, recounting how he had defended his sheep from lions and bears, defeating them with nothing but a sling and his faith in God. "The same God who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the bear will deliver me from this Philistine," he said confidently. Though hesitant, Saul allowed David to go, offering him his own armor. However, the weight and size of the armor hindered David's movements, and he chose to face Goliath with only his shepherd's tools, a staff, a sling, and 5 smooth stones he picked from a nearby stream. As David stepped into the valley, the sight of the young boy armed with a sling drew laughter and derision from Goliath. The giant sneered, "Am I a dog, that you come at me with sticks?" But David showed no fear. Instead, he moved with purpose, his heart filled with faith. Without hesitation, David placed a stone into his sling, swung it with practiced precision, and released it. The stone flew through the air and struck Goliath square in the forehead. The impact was so powerful that the giant collapsed to the ground, face first. For a moment there was stunned silence. Then David ran to Goliath, drew the giant's own sword, and used it to cut off his head. The Philistine army, seeing their champion defeated by a mere boy, panicked and fled. The Israelites, now emboldened, surged forward and pursued the fleeing enemy, securing a decisive victory. David's triumph over Goliath was more than just a victory for Israel. It became a symbol of unwavering faith and courage. It showed that even the seemingly impossible can be overcome when one places their trust in God. David, though young and small, proved that true strength lies not in weapons or physical power, but in a steadfast belief in a higher purpose. His story has endured through the ages, inspiring countless generations.